Ladies and gentlemen, this is TVP World. You're watching another edition of Break the Fake, where we debunk fake news and combat false narratives. I'm your host, Benjamin Lee, and let's get rolling. Today we begin in Russia, the self-proclaimed superpower that's now relying on reinforcement from North Korea, a country where the economy is based on loyalty, oath, and vintage tractors. Yes, comrades, the cavalry has arrived, and they're wearing ill-fitting uniforms, clutching 1950s rifles, and probably wondering why their promised a glorious battle for the motherland looks suspicious like being sent into a meat grinder with a polite nudge from their Russian handlers. Now, despite these reinforcements from Kim Jong-Un's great army of malnourished conscripts, Ukraine is still stubbornly holding on to territory that Putin once boasted would be taken in 3 days. The Russian propaganda machine, led by its favorite talking heads, now has an official message for the people of the Kursk region. There's no money, but hang on, comrades.
Государство все 100% расходов на себя не возьмет. Мы не компенсируем разрушенную баню. Не потому, что мы не хотим этого сделать, а потому, что нам предстоит. Вы представьте, сколько сел, поселков, дорог всего уничтожено. Школы, больницы, поликлиники, магазины, аптеки, дома ваши. Мы за счет чего это все будем восстанавливать? А у нас еще и СВО продолжается. А СВО высокотехничное. Нам надо землю освободить. А у нас, извините, каждый снаряд стоит денег. Значит, это все идет из бюджета.
Yep, in a region that's seen more explosions than infrastructure funding, the locals are left with nothing but empty platitudes and hand-me-down optimism. Now, the Kremlin's strategic genius now seems boiling down to recycling Soviet slogans and throwing the occasional surplus cabbage at the starving masses. If things get any worse, we might see Putin propose a victory garden initiative, because nothing boosts morale like planting potatoes in radioactive craters. Meanwhile, State TV continues its farcical pep talks. Don't worry, comrades, says a grizzly-haired propagandist with poorly concealed panic behind his eyes. Our glorious Orishnik missile will solve everything. Yes, the mythical Orishnik, Russia's equivalent of a fairy tale dragon, lots of fire, lots of noise, and absolutely no practical results. And let's not forget North Korea's contribution to morale, because if there's one thing that inspires confidence, it's watching malnourished teenagers with rusty Kalashnikovs paraded around as saviors of Russian sovereignty. Perhaps Kim Jong-Un threw in a few motivational posters as part of the package deal. In the grand scheme of Putin's war plans, this chaotic spectacle is less strategic masterstroke and more Weekend at Bernie's, with the Russian military propped up like a puppet while the Kremlin waves its arms and shouts, "Look, everything is under control." Spoiler alert, it's not. But don't worry, citizens of Kursk, you've got state television, empty speeches, and the occasional parade of North Korean volunteers to keep you warm. Who needs heat, food, or infrastructure when you have the fiery rhetoric of state propaganda and a handful of turnips? Stay strong, comrades. After all, the Kremlin believes in you, just not enough to send actual help. Slovakia, the land of breathtaking mountains, charming castles, and apparently an undying love affair with Russian gas pipelines. Prime Minister Robert Fico is once again clutching his pearls and hyperventilating over the prospect of losing that sweet, sweet Siberian methane. In an Oscar-worthy performance, Putin claimed that Ukrainian saboteurs had been caught red-handed with maps of Slovakia's gas system. Yes, because every elite espionage operation starts with paper maps. Perhaps they're even giving coffee stains for that extra retro touch. Honestly, you'd think Ukraine was plotting to steal the pipes themselves and smuggle them across the border in backpacks.
Знаете, что совсем недавно мне наши спецслужбы доложили о том, что в Словакии, по-моему, задержаны диверсанты. Причем это ясно, что украинские диверсанты с картами расположения объектов газовой энергетики в Словакии. И конечно, я вот, мне только буквально там вчера-позавчера об этом доложили. Все-таки я попрошу по партнерским каналам, связи сохраняются, да, чтобы запросили все-таки своих коллег, наши спецслужбы, что же это все-таки такое.
Meanwhile, Fico, who seems to consider Gazprom's board meetings more important than NATO summits, is sounding the alarm. If Zelensky doesn't let Russian gas flow through Ukraine, we might have a serious conflict. Now, on the Ukrainian side, Prime Minister Denis Shmyhal made it clear. As of January 1st, 2025, Ukraine's gas pipeline will be exclusively for non-Russian gas. It's a bold move, but let's face it, if Vito gets desperate enough, he might try smuggling canisters of Gazprom's finest under his coat while whistling the Soviet anthem. But let's not forget Putin in all of this. The man who once presented himself as a grandmaster of geopolitical chess is now panicking over pipelines like a toddler clutching their favorite toy truck. No transit deal, big conflict. Oh, Vladimir, darling, when was the last time one of your brilliant threads actually worked? Meanwhile, Slovakia seems trapped in a bizarre love triangle with Moscow and its own gas meters. Maybe Fico should consider taking romantic strolls through Gazprom offices instead of the European diplomatic halls. After all, nothing says energy security like tying your country's future to a regime that weaponizes fuel deliveries like a villain in a low-budget spy movie. But don't worry, Robert. When the gas stops flowing, you can always warm your hands over the fiery passion of your undying loyalty to the Kremlin. Or maybe Putin will let you borrow one of those infamous Oreshnik missiles for a cozy winter bonfire. Oh, the mighty Russian bear, once feared across continent, is now trembling at the buzz of Ukrainian drones over Kazan. Yes, dear comrades, the second strongest army in the world has once again been caught with his pants down, while tiny flying robots casually strolled over hundreds of kilometers of Russian territory to drop off their fiery little gifts. But fear not, Supreme Commander Vladimir Putin is in constant contact with the military, according to his ever-faithful ventriloquist dummy, Dmitry Peskov. One can only imagine the scene. Putin seated at an unnecessarily long table, staring at a flashing map, while generals nervously fiddle with oversized PowerPoint remote controls. What do you mean the drones got through? Didn't you see them on your radar? Were you too busy polishing your heroic retreat under fire medals? Meanwhile, Kazan, a city hundreds of kilometers from the front line, descended into chaos. Panicked citizens look into the sky, probably wonder how a nation that spent billions of its military could fail to notice a few buzzing gnats creeping through its airspace. It's almost poetic, isn't it? The Kremlin can brag about unstoppable Oreshnik missiles with a range of 5,500 kilometers, yet a handful of drones casually treat Russian cities like a weekend road trip stop. Naturally, propaganda outlets are working overtime to spin this humiliation into yet another heroic resilience story. Solovyov is probably frothing at the mouth on state TV, demanding a retaliatory strike. And Margarita Simonyan is likely composing a teary ode to the bravery of Kazan's air defense operations, who bravely hit absolutely nothing. But let's face it, every drone strikes deep into Russia is a symbolic slap across Putin's Botox cheeks. For a man who still insists he has everything under control, these repeated breaches of Russian airspace must feel like an unwelcome plot twist in his very own war epic. So when Putin remains in contact with the military, perhaps someone could gently remind him that drones aren't deterred by long tables, shirtless horseback rides, or nostalgic Soviet speeches. And if the mighty Russian military can't even handle glorified RC planes, maybe they should stick to their true strengths: parades, overly dramatic anthems, and of course, terrifying unarmed civilians in occupied territories. And with that, we conclude this edition of Break the Fake. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.